May 7, 2015 will now come to order. Please, clerk, call the roll.
Caruso.
Here.
Giordano.
Here.
Montalbano.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Sheldon.
Here.
Del Garcia.
Here. Everyone please stand for the pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, have notice of this meeting been given in accordance with the Sunshine Law?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, notice of this meeting has been given to the newspaper and public according to Notice 187.
All right. Before we start tonight, so there's no confusion, our attorney will not be available for the Thursday, June 4th meeting, and we found out that June 25th, which is also a Thursday, is available. So we're looking to make a change from June 4th to June 25th for June only. Any of the members have any problem with that? No problem? Okay. Yes, anyone who's noticed for the 4th, cases that'll be carried over to the 25th of June, unless they ask for a special meeting, that is. Okay. Do we have to have a vote on this?
Just a voice vote.
Voice vote, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's the next meeting, June 25th. Applications for adjournment. Mr. Cosarelli.
Yes, Mr. Garcia. Item number 6, ZB 2015-09, 78-102 Washington Avenue.
Yeah.
We ask that be carried. I understand the board has the availability of a special meeting in May.
May 28th, I believe. Am I right, Madam Secretary?
That's correct.
Do we have that meeting date?
Yes, we have the room available for that night.
All right. And with the board's permission, I can probably fill the night for the second case if you allow me to put it on for that night.
Is that case on our current agenda?
No, it is not.
If it's not on the current agenda, then we cannot put it.
That's fine. Thank you.
All right, so anyone who's in the audience that's interested is here for ZB 2015-09, 78-102 Washington Avenue, DePopolo. That's an application to propose an amendment to 5 stories on Washington Avenue and 6 stories facing the rear, where 7 stories facing Washington Avenue and 8 stories facing the rear, which was previously approved by ZB 2005-02. Also is changing the restaurant to 3,750 square feet of commercial space. Is that accurate? Are we changing the commercial or are we staying with the restaurant?
We're probably going to stay with the restaurant, and we've noticed for both.
You've noticed for both?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Have you noticed for May 28th or for tonight?
Tonight.
Okay. If anyone's here on this application, it will not be heard tonight. It will be carried to May 28th, 7:30 in this room.
Now, did you review the resolutions that were approved previously?
Yes, they were attached to our application as well.
I understand that, but I think there was something mentioned about the restaurant use.
There was, the restaurant use was specifically included. It affects the parking calculation.
But this does not have to come back for a D.
No, it does not.
Okay. If it's changed, I mean, the
If
commercial.
it's changed, it wouldn't come back for it's a parking variance if it's on.
Am I right, are we right, Mr. Di Lorenzo? Correct. Okay. All right, so anyone in the audience, that case will be adjourned to May 28th at 7 o'clock p.m.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other cases for adjournment? I see we have one here. Which one is this one? Frederick. All right, number 4 on our agenda tonight, ZB 2015-10, 29 Frederick Street. We have a fax to Ms. Dalbo, our secretary, relation, this was dated April 30th. Jeanette Stella, Zoning Board of Adjustment, 29 Frederick Street, Belleville, New Jersey. I write to you on behalf of my firm's client, Jeanette Stella, with regards to her pending application before the Zoning Board of Adjustment for premises noted above. This matter was tentatively scheduled to be heard by the board at their upcoming meeting on May 7, 2015. Unfortunately, I have scheduling conflict that evening And likewise, my client needs additional time in order to secure attendance of fact witnesses. Accordingly, I respectfully request that this matter be carried over to the board's meeting of June 4, 2015. I have not yet noticed for the application and will notice for the June 4, 2015 meeting. Thank you for your courtesies in this regard. So, any objection to that, gentlemen?
Yeah,
What?
our meeting is canceled June.
No, I understand that. We will notify her that our meeting is now going to be changed
To the
to
28th.
June 25th.
26th.
25th. Thursday, June 25th.
25, okay.
Okay? So anyone in attendance here for that case, which is ZB 2015-10, 29 Frederick Street, that case is adjourned to June 25th, 2015 at 7 p.m. Madam Secretary, please send them a notice that the June meeting has
I
been
will email
changed.
the attorney tomorrow.
All right, thank you. Okay, I understand there's another one? Go ahead. Oh, yes, here. Here we go. This is the other case where there's a problem. No.
Franklin Street.
Okay, I understand there's a problem with the application for ZB 2015-12, 167 Franklin Street.
Mr. Chairman, the applicants mailed the notices properly to the individuals on the radius list, but the newspaper did not publish the notice within beyond 10 days. So we'll be looking for a date for them, and they can republish when we give them a date. I'm assuming we're looking at the 25th of June?
Yes, 25th of June.
Thank you.
Okay? Anyone here for that case? ZB 2015-12. That will be adjourned to June 25th, 2015 at 7 o'clock p.m. Okay. All right, now.
Somebody said that.
What?
Would it be possible for May 28th?
I doubt it. I'll be honest with you. However, if it is for May 28th, or you want to try and do it for May 28th, then it would require you to pay additional money because it's a special meeting.
Okay.
Okay, we're
I don't know if we could hear, well, he said he had a second case for that night, so if he, no, his is on the agenda. He's never had a second case.
Second case.
No, the second wasn't, so if he had enough, if he thought the first case would only take enough time that he could do two cases, theirs is a non-conforming use. If you want to try, it's okay. So you want me to change that?
Yeah, please.
To May 28th?
May 28th. Okay, you'll have to contact them tomorrow to find out how much it's going to cost.
Okay.
Okay, I will. Thank you
This
so much.
is ZB 2015-12, 167 Franklin Street. That's a pre-existing non-conforming use. So anyone in the audience, nobody's left, that will be adjourned to May 28th. And we'll try and squeeze it in. If there's any problem, then what we'll do is just move it over to June 25th.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay? All right then. Mr. Gassion, I understand you have the monopoly tonight of the rest of the
Well, I
cases.
did, but based on the adjournments that have taken place, I'm the only guy ready to go with 3.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're the only one ready to go with anything.
Correct.
So, which case would you, because we're waiting to see, I assume you do not want to start Brighton Avenue because we're missing a member.
Correct. I'd like to start with the one top on the list, 176, 178 Washington Ave, if that's okay.
Okay, no problem. So ZB 2015-02, 176, 178 Washington Avenue will be our first case on the agenda. You may proceed.
Excuse my voice tonight. The
That's
allergies
all
got me just a little bit. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, council's name is Robert Gassion, the firm is Gassion Pomaco, 524 Union Avenue, Belleville. I represent the applicant in this matter, 176-178 Washington Avenue, LLC. My client owns the property at that location, 176-178 Washington Avenue. The property is a 20-unit apartment building, but the construction office has it listed as 18. We're seeking a certification pursuant to 4055-68 and Belleville Ordinance 23-14.1 as a 20-unit building. The building was constructed in 1974 based on a 1973 land use approval. I have submitted the tax records with the application reflecting that as of 1977, the property has since then been taxed as 20 units. I also submitted Department of Community Affairs documentation from 1999 and 2009 reflecting 20 units. This is a BV zone. Under the Belleville Ordinance up to 1977, multi-families were a permitted use in the zone. The proof is mainly based on documentation, but I'm going to add some additional proof in that you will hear from Mr. Cerciu of JC Management, the owners and owners of 176, 178 Washington Avenue LLC, and Ralph Giordano, who has been the rental agent, salesperson, and manager at one time or another of this property since it was erected. Mr. Cerciu will discuss his contract of purchase and how the property is currently used. Mr. Giordano will discuss the history of the property. I'd like to call my first witness, Mr. Cerciu.
Mr. Castione, I believe Mr. Cerciu was sworn at our February 5th meeting.
He was,
Yes,
and
you should-
what happened was we got into a discussion with the chairman pretty much immediately, as I recall, after him being sworn, and we really didn't get much done, is my recollection.
Right. You are still the property owner and you're still on the road.
Mr. Cerciu?
Can you spell your name again for me?
Churchill, C-I-U-R,
And your first name?
Vincenzo,
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cerciu, what is your business address?
263 Mulberry Drive, Elmwood Park, New Jersey, 07407.
And are you one of the owners of the entity that owns the property in question?
Yes,
And who are your other partners?
my father, Joseph Churchill,
And when did you buy the property?
December
And how many units is that property?
20.
And did your contract call for 20 units?
Yes,
And I show you a document. Is this a copy of the contract?
yes,
And I point out paragraph 14. And does that paragraph say you intend to use the property as a 20-unit multiple residential building and the total number of approved dwelling units is 20?
yes,
And that is the contract that was signed by you or by your father, and the contract you followed with which you purchased this property.
yes,
And has it been used as 20 since you bought it?
yes,
And you're continuing to use it as a 20 unit?
yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit this as, I don't know how you want it.
8-2.
A2.
What's the date on that contract, if you would?
Sometime in 2015, I believe.
Signed January 2014.
Thank you.
I really have no other questions of this witness. I will call Mr. Giordano if the board has no questions of Mr. Churchill.
I have a couple of questions. First question I have is, I looked at the property today extensively, and you have a janitor that lives on the basement,
Super,
the super. He's in the back.
right,
What else is in the basement besides the super?
laundry room.
There's a laundry room. Is there another apartment in the basement?
Yes,
Okay, so there's only 2 apartments in the basement.
correct.
Now, do you know if these were added on after the 18?
No,
You don't know.
I know.
All right. I would like to All right, we'll hold off until later. Go ahead.
I have no further questions.
You have another
I have
witness?
Mr. Giordano, absolutely.
All right, let's put Mr. Giordano on. Try and get this out of the way.
Would you raise your right hand, please? With regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
Yes.
You state your name and spell your last name, please?
Ralph B. Giordano, Giordano.
Mr. Giordano, what is your business address?
Relationship.
No.
we
You're no relation to the member, Mr. Giordano, right?
No,
No, we're not each other. Okay, good. We just have to keep that for the record. That's all. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
303 Route 46 West Fairfield, New Jersey.
And what is your occupation?
Real estate.
And for many years, were you located in Belleville?
544 Washington Avenue and 727 Gerardman Street. We built that building.
And are you familiar with the property at 176-178 Washington Avenue in Belleville?
Yes, I am.
When did you first get involved in the management or rental of that building?
Frank Polizzi was building it, and he called us to rent all the new apartments out, and which we did.
And when Frank Polizzi built that, did he then almost immediately after building it sell it?
Yes.
And to whom did he sell it?
John Iannuzzi used to own Flower Run on the corner, and his brother, and Joe. Joe.
You know when that was?
You know, it was in the 70s, right? That's all I can remember. It was in the 70s.
Very soon after construction, is my understanding, Mr. Chairman, probably early 70s.
Okay.
And have you managed the property or rented it for the owners during the entire time of its existence?
Yes.
And has it been 20 units from the day you first became familiar with it?
Since the first time, yes.
And were you familiar with it since the time Mr. Polizzi built it?
Yes.
And have you also handled the sales in conjunction with this?
I sold it from Mr. Iannuzzi to Greg Monterano, and from Greg Monterano to Charlie Gambino, and from Charlie Gambino to Mr. Cheshire.
And on all of those occasions, did the contract refer to the property as a 20-unit building?
Always. 1 second, please.
So you handled all sales?
Yes, wait, I want to put on the record that Mr. Valano was here, please. Can we have him here? Go ahead.
I can certainly, you heard all of Mr. Giordano's testimony, right, Mr. Valano?
No,
No? I can have him repeat it.
if you want me to participate, yes.
I would prefer
If
you
you don't,
But
participate,
then you
yes.
also had testimony from the...
I will have him repeat his testimony.
I apologize.
Very brief.
Apologize, the part where you took
We
me-
understood what happened.
Yeah, sorry.
We sympathize.
Yes.
Mr. Giordano, have you managed, rented, or sold this property during the full time of its existence?
Yes.
And I think you indicated who the builder was,
Mr. Polizzi.
and who was the first person he sold it to? Who was the person he sold it to?
John Iannuzzi, his brother, and Joe Orlando.
And at that time, was it a 20-unit building?
Always was a plan.
And did you handle the sale from Mr. Iannuzzi to Mr. Martirano?
Yes.
And that contract referred to it as a 20-unit
20
building?
units.
And did you handle the sale from Mr. Martirano to Mr. Gambino?
Yes.
And did that contract refer to
1
this? And did you handle the sale from Mr. Gambino to Mr. Churchill?
Yes.
And at that time, it was
20 units.
represented, it was 20 units. And during the course of this entire life of this building, when you managed or rented it, was it always rented out as 20 units?
20 units.
I have no further questions.
One question. You were saying basement. Them apartments are all above grade because of where the grade goes down. And they all have windows above grade.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, well, making me understand that they're basement apartments. Really
Well, they're not on the
basement.
first level, they're not on the second level, they're not on the third level.
They're
They're on the ground level.
That's it, ground level, you're right, Jim.
Okay, matter of fact, where the laundromat part is, that is under the ground, isn't it?
Well, it's the same level as the one in the apartments, the only thing, the laundromat don't have windows.
Yes, but because of the grade,
Yeah, because of the grade, the way it goes
and
down.
there is windows. I
Yeah,
saw
there's
2
windows.
basement or 3 basement
Yeah,
windows.
there's windows,
And there's exhausts for the dryers.
no drivers, yes.
Okay. Now, the question is, in the application, it was submitted tax records. And on the tax records, it says it was originally built, I believe in 73,
Around that area.
and then there's a sale, well, this one, somebody changed it. And then in 98, 3/17/98, it was sold for $880,000. On 6/29/99, it was sold for over $1 million. And then it was sold again for $1 on 12/15/03. And I believe it was sold for $1 after that also. I would like to swear in Mr. Di Lorenzo before we go any further.
Certainly.
Can we swear Mr. Di Lorenzo? Sure.
In regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
State your name, spell your last name, please, Frank.
Frank Lorenzo, D-E-L-O-R-E-N-Z-O.
You're the zoning officer and the construction official in Belleville.
Okay. Now, based upon the records I'm finding, Mr. Di Lorenzo, when did it require a CO for any properties in the township of Belleville?
Around 97, I believe,
97.
around, yeah, give or
Then
take.
can somebody explain to me,
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes they do sell it without compromise, it's out of our control.
if 3 times or 4? This will be the
Because they're
5th.
family members, I don't know.
Well, no, only once is a family member, because only a family member gets the $1. The other ones can't be family members, because it says $880,000 and $1,003,300. These are the sales. And above it, it says 18 family apartment building. I'm going by the tax record here. That you submitted, by the way, I believe, Mr.
Tax record shows from 1977, it's 20 units, as I recall.
Well, then, can you explain to me this page? I'd be very happy if you could explain it to me. This one here. It's right past your dark colored one, the next page afterwards. There's 2 that came out dark.
I'm looking at the 1977 reval, and it has it listed as 20 units. It's a darker page.
Well, go to the one after the darker page, please.
Twenty units, left-hand side, about the 3rd line down.
You're looking at different pages.
This
Well,
page
there's 2
here.
darker pages, I'm looking
This
for.
is
No,
the
the one-
page here,
the
the
one
one
after.
after the dark. Get the next dark, turn it over. Is that dark too?
Yeah, it's got 20 units.
Then turn it over.
One more.
There we go.
This is in the 1960s.
Look at sales. See the word sales? See it changes hands 3 times? The box right in the middle. And above it says 18 family apartment. On the left, it says building permit 18 family apartment with 10 garages and 17
This is
open
an
space.
18-family apartment. This is a 1969 record.
But underneath it, it has all the sales.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it apply to that. The tax records show from 1977, it's 20 units.
But what I'm trying to say is, how come if they were sold again in if the requirement for a CO was made in 97, you have 3 sales afterwards and there's no COs.
I have no knowledge of that.
Oh,
And my client just bought in 2014.
I understand.
He has no knowledge of that. And those entries are not relevant to the 18-family reference above. That 18-family reference is from 69 or
Well, I don't
up to
think
74.
I don't think it could be 69
Or
because the building
74.
wasn't built yet.
Or 74.
Or 74, all right, 74.
So are we going for a particular date?
I'm
Are
sorry.
we going for a particular date?
The date is 1977 that's relevant to the law, and we have tax records from 77
Not,
forward.
not deal with the 77 or?
Okay. And do you have any records where the 2 apartments were added on, that you got a permit, there was a permit made?
I don't have any record of any permit, and that would be in construction official's office, and I don't think they have those records.
Okay.
And it appears there was a site plan approval at some time back in 1973. But again, I wouldn't expect the construction official's office to have it. It's 41 years ago, but don't have it. And certainly I don't have it. I didn't handle it, and I don't keep records that far back. In this day and age, after 15 years, I think most people throw their records away.
Okay. Now, it says here from 74, since its inception, it was used as 20 units. Anyway, that's what's in your application.
Well,
Apparently wasn't picked here. The second paragraph on page 4 of your application. Applicant 176, 178 Washington Aluminum Liability Corporation the subject property was constructed in 1974 and was used as a multifamily residential use with 20 dwelling units since its construction. That's what's in your application.
that's the information that we had from Mr. Giordano, that he was familiar with it and it was used in 20 units. That's buttressed by the tax records, at least as of 1977, which is the relevant time for this application. If we were in place in 1977, it was legal at that time, and that's all we have to prove in conjunction with what the law is in Belleville at that time.
What was the density at that time?
Multifamily was permitted at that time. Yeah, I submitted the records. It doesn't give you that information.
No density requirement?
You've got to, I have submitted it, and I have never been able, it may be in there, but I didn't find it, let me put it that way. Mr. DiLorenzo, are you familiar with the ordinance prior to 1977 listing density?
But, Mr. DiLorenzo, if he was, even if it had a density, no density requirement, if he makes an application for 18 units, can he construct 20 without getting an amended permit?
You have to look back at the zoning there back then. It was allowed 20, would be permissible.
He would be permitted to build 20 even without a permit?
No,
The
not
permit
without a
states
permit.
it's for 18.
Right, not without a permit, it's permissible for zoning.
Okay.
But there's no record of the permit. There's no records of permits at that time. No records.
Well, if the original, all right, so you're saying it changed somewhere between 74 and 77?
Well, I mean, Mr. Giordano's saying it's a 20 unit from the beginning. Obviously, there's something in here that says in 1974, they're talking about 18 units. In 1977, the tax records are talking about 20 units. So it could be that Mr. Giordano wasn't familiar with it right in the beginning. When he first became aware of it, it was 20 units. Somewhere in 1974, it may have been 18, but I don't know that, nor would I concede that.
Any other questions by members of the board? Yes, Mr. Milano.
I'm sorry. Me? I'm sorry. My apologies. Yes,
So,
Mr. Long.
just to catch me up a little bit. So, the testimony here, can we close the door, have a conversation happening?
I will put Mr. Searcy back on the stand for 2
Just to
minutes.
catch me up with Mr. Grimson's testimony. It was your position, it was always sold as a 20 unit every time he sold.
That's the testimony of Mr. Giordano.
Right, and that's the new owner over there, right? And he was sold it as a 20 unit.
He has a contract that says 20 units, and I submitted that into the record, and I will put him back on to testify to that.
As a 20 unit.
Yes.
Do we have any other contracts that show it's a 20 unit?
I asked Mr. Giordano if he could find anything.
Right.
He indicated. Mr. Giordano, do you recall how long ago it was that Mr. Gambino bought the building? Approximately.
Had to be 15 years ago.
So he has no, I asked him to search his records, to find no records of those contracts.
I had, DCA always had us 20, I don't know if that means anything here.
No, no.
Always had us 20.
You don't have any contracts.
I have nothing.
Nobody has any contracts.
I asked, I tried to get Mr. Gambino here. I asked Mr. Giordano if he could get Mr. Martirano here, but you know, it's not easy to get.
No, I understand.
tenants meetings.
I just thought, I guess you sold it as a realtor, right?
Yeah, as a realtor, I
I
have
just thought maybe you would have.
He was not, Mr. Giordano, were you a partner in this building?
No.
You always were the realtor, the sales agent, or the management agent.
I know you were a broker, if I recollect, correct?
Excuse me?
You were a broker, am I correct?
A broker, yeah.
Yes.
Well, we started as a rental for this guy in Uzi, just renting the apartments, then renewing the leases, and then Mr. Gambino, after Mr. Gambino bought it, he gave it to us from that.
Right.
He was the last buyer until Mr. Session.
No, I was just wondering, as a broker, if we would have archived any of this records like they normally do.
Also, what happened, Mr. Giordano was partnering with Belleville Realtors in the early stages of his career, and that office is long since gone.
I wish I did have the paperwork, I'd bring it in.
Yeah, and I know you would, I'm just, I have to ask the question.
Oh, sure.
Any other questions?
I just would like to bring Mr. Churchill back for 3 or 4
Well, I want to
questions.
ask him some questions.
I'm sorry.
Since you managed the property all those years, was there any time that there was any construction done on the ground floor?
No,
None.
none. It was there, when Mr. Felizzi sold it to Mr. Iannuzzi, everything was there. It was 20 units.
Well, I was there today with Mr. Sheldon, and we went around the building, and we found that at least an air conditioner was put in afterwards.
Well,
And also, wait a minute, let me finish. And also a window was put in afterwards, because you can see where the bricks were cut. Clearly cut, wasn't it?
the only thing I could say about the window was maybe on a DCA inspection, they said the window had to be bigger.
No, this was a small window.
Well, I don't, believe me, I know that both apartments were there since the get. Mr. Felizzi built them, Mr. Iannuzzi bought it, and then it went on and on after that.
Okay, let's go on to the janitor's apartment. Super janitor, whatever we want to call it. His apartment can be entered from the back, correct? There's like a black,
Yes.
it's like a patio
You
area.
go up,
You go up the stairs,
Upstairs.
there's a steel door, and you can go in through there. Is there any other entrance into that apartment?
no,
What about the other apartment?
that's when you come down the steps into the laundry room, you get into that apartment.
That's how you get that apartment. Where is the equipment room?
As soon as you get down to the bottom of the steps,
Yeah.
to your left, that's the one, that's the boiler room and all the meters.
Well, that's where the garages are.
No, but there's a room there. You go down the steps, you walk into the building from Washington Avenue, go down to the bottom of the steps.
Right.
Before you make the right into the laundry room, there's a door on the left-hand side. That's where the boiler room is.
And the electrical room?
Electrical, all the water meters and electric, everything is in there.
Because you couldn't get into the building, that's why I asked the question. Okay. All right, now you can bring the, wait, before that, let's ask if any member of the public wants a question this witness, before we go on. Any member of the public? No. Okay.
Mr. Churchill?
I have.
You have a question?
Yeah. Mr. Gassion, back in February, I have in my notes that in 1973, there around, a variance was granted for 18 units. That's what I have written down. Is that the case?
There is some sort of land use approval, but I don't know what it is. I could not get a record of it, obviously. I wouldn't expect the construction official's office to still have it, and I have no such record of it. Somewhere, maybe in the
So we don't
tax
know,
records.
we don't know if 20 was approved. Could have been,
I am not making a representation. I don't have a record to reflect what was approved.
Frank, do you
I only can tell you what usage was. I mean, I can tell you based on the witnesses.
anything in your files in terms of what was approved in 73?
Well, my letter shows it there.
Your denial letter?
Your word.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay. That's all I have.
You may, bring the gentleman back.
Mr. Church, are you the owner of the building in question?
Yes.
And did you enter into a contract to purchase the building as 20 units?
Yes.
And did you testify previously that you purchased it as a 20-unit building and there was a clause in the contract that referred to it as a legal 20-unit building?
Yes.
And was it a 20-unit when you first looked at it?
Yes.
Is it being used as a 20-unit today?
Yes.
I have no further questions. Those are the questions that were relevant that I asked Mr. Church.
Mr. Milano? Any questions? Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Any questions by members of the public? Okay, is that your only witness?
Those are my only witnesses.
Okay.
Yes.
Any member of the public wish to give testimony based upon this application? No. Okay. Then you may sum up.
I have a question for Nancy Gashiel.
Okay.
So, just so I can on the same page, is, so I'm fully familiar with the 1977 and the 1955 statutes, right?
We don't know if it's 77 or 79, by the way. We can never find a date on that
I
document.
believe it's 79,
Yeah.
What was 79?
and when it was changed.
The revaluation?
Yes. No.
No, the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
The ordinance.
I never could tell if it was 77 or
I believe it
79.
was 79.
I thought it was 79, but I could not tell.
Okay.
After all these years, I couldn't find the record that said what it was.
The revaluation was definitely 77.
Yes, the reval was 77, but the zoning ordinance, I think, was 79.
So whether it's 77 or 79, the date that you're shooting for, it
We
really
have the
doesn't
proof
matter.
for that date.
So I guess what I'm asking to you is it your assertion that it's legal because, what, it was permitted at that time?
It was permitted, absolutely, that is my assertion. It was permitted at that time, it was used that way at that time, it was a legal use.
So, if I may, if it wasn't built as a 20, right, but over time, it was used as a 20, long as prior to 1979, it was deemed legal.
Correct, because you have to give the applicant the benefit of the doubt that he got an approval to do it, and he had the right to do it at that time. The density allowed it, the use was allowed, and we have the proof that it existed.
So, we know the density allowed it? Well, I thought we weren't
There
sure.
was no density requirement within the ordinance, and you take a look at the older buildings on Washington Avenue, you'll see that the density allowed, that there are numerous multi-family buildings with 50 units per acre, or whatever it was.
So, I'm just making sure I'm interpreting it correctly. So it's your assertion, since that it was not allowed, right?
My assertion is that it was allowed.
That it wasn't not allowed, it was allowed,
It was allowed.
right? Whether it was gotten legally or not is,
But we don't know that, there's no record to show. The
That's
records, I've been before this board 25 times, if I've been here once with a certification.
yep.
And Mr. DiLorenzo has indicated previously there was a fire, there are not a lot of records. We've always presented the case with proofs from the tax office, and if the tax office records clearly showed the use, and it was legal at the time, the board has, to the best of my recollection, approved the certification. Now, we've gone one step further with this case, and we brought Mr. Giordano in, who would have no reason to misrepresent anything, and has testified under oath that this was used as a 20 unit from the day it was transferred from Mr. Polizzi, who built it, to Mr. Iannuzzi, his brother, and Mr. Orlando, who were the first purchasers. And that every time the transfer took place, it was a 20 unit. Now, my client wouldn't go pay a price for a 20 unit. He doesn't think it was a legal 20 unit. In addition, the contract specifically said it was a legal 20 unit. Specifically said it, and I've submitted that contract. Paragraph 14, I believe.
Just wanted to get the whole thought
I'm
process.
sorry.
That's what I was shooting for.
I've given my summation,
Well,
basically.
let me ask you a question. When I became a member of
You
this
asked me a lot
board,
of questions.
originally, in '87,
Uh-huh.
there was a density requirement. And it was, I
Yes,
believe,
from
24,
1970
25 units an acre.
From 77 or 79 ordinance, put a density requirement in, absolutely.
Right.
But the 55 ordinance did not have it to effect. Again, I submitted the ordinance. If you can find it in there, fine. I
You
couldn't find
submitted
it.
the ordinance?
It's in the application.
You don't have it in the application?
It's part of the application.
You can't make heads or tails.
Tommy? You see it there.
You know what page it's on?
In the back of the submission.
1955 ordinance.
So you're saying there was no change in the ordinance from 55 to 79? is
No,
what you're saying?
I am quite comfortable there was not, because over the history of my presentations before this board, I searched these things out with Mary Lou Hood a long time ago, and we were unable to find any other records. I have copies of all the ordinances at my office. 55 is the first one we could lay our hands on. I'm not saying there wasn't one before that, because there was, but the first change was either 77 or 79, I think 79. And then they went on from there, and I had no reason to check those changes. I think 90-something, whatever.
So your argument is, and don't get me wrong if I'm misunderstanding this, because I don't want to misunderstand. Your argument is that if it was legal to put extra units in, even though you never got a permit for it.
No, we can't prove we never got a permit for it, because
But
the
you can't
records are not
prove you
clear.
did.
That's correct. But if you go by what the history of the records are in Belleville or any of the older towns, there are so many places that are used a particular way. And again, as I said, 25, that's a conservative number of cases I've had before this board. I'm sure other attorneys have been before the board with the same thing. And the board historically has relied upon the tax records, because the tax records reflect the usage.
I understand that, but Mr. Di Lorenzo, based upon your denial notice, I see here tax history and permit history. And it says in 1973, there was a permit to build 18-unit apartment buildings.
Correct.
So if there was a permit from 73, why wouldn't there be any subsequent permits in the record? Now, I can see if nothing shows, Mr. Gassion, but I have a 73 permit showing. Yet I have no permit afterwards.
Mr. Di Lorenzo will readily tell you that amongst his records, he can't be sure that he shows all the permits. Numerous times he's unable to locate it because there was a fire. So if somehow the record to add those 2 units.
But Mr. Gassion, if there's a fire and one record is destroyed, usually the records are put together, so the other record should be destroyed with it.
No, Jeff,
You
that's
can't even
wrong.
find.
No?
That's wrong, yeah. There was a fire down Public Works, I don't know, I guess in the early 80s. And it burned out a lot of stuff. These are just little cards that I have that were found that, but it's not all the permits. If I had
All
the permits,
that Frank has in his office are cards. That's where he gets the information from. He doesn't have the permits, he doesn't have the applications, he doesn't have the resolutions. They were burned. That's what he has, the cards. When he gives you that opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, well, I have seen a photocopy of a card that he has. He's got a card index.
Well, Mr. Di Lorenzo, the cards that you have, were they in Public Works?
I don't know where he was at. I wasn't
You don't know
around.
where the cards came from?
I don't know. Yeah, it could have been 383, Jeff. They're from the building department, Jeff.
And the building department was always in 383?
No. I believe it was at Public Works before that.
Public Works before. Okay. No other, any other questions based upon Mr. Gassion's testimony?
Not testimony,
The
arguments.
public, any member of the public wish to give any testimony at all? None. Oh, you have a question, go ahead.
Are we stating that there are 19 units and one super unit? Or 20 and a super?
No, 20 units total.
Total.
Including the super.
He's using the super is using one of the units, yes. 19 plus one for the super.
Frankie?
Yes.
Do the two units, the lower units have proper ingress and egress?
Yes, that's all up to code. The DCA's been there with the green card every 5 years to go there and grant them that. So if there's any issues, they tell them and tell us.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, gentlemen? No other questions? Nobody wishing to give testimony?
Are they full units down in the basement, complete?
I can't testify to that.
Yes, they are.
What are they, 4 rooms, 5 rooms?
They're one-bedroom homes.
One bedroom?
The other units upstairs, are they one bedrooms also?
One bedroom, yes.
Everything's a one bedroom?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Gassion, wish to sum up?
Well, I think I would be repetitive. I just made my arguments, but I'll just briefly say, the tax records support our argument that it's 20 units. Mr. Giordano, who would have no reason to misrepresent anything to this board, was very positive in his testimony that it has been 20 units since he became familiar with this building in 1974. I understand the multiple housing is not a record that you consider heavily, but it certainly reflects that it was 20 units. So now, I can't get Price and Lee because Price and Lee was no longer printed after 1972. So this permit was 73 or the 74, and the building was built at that time, so there's no Price and Lee. So I have the state of New Jersey, I have the tax records, I have the direct testimony of a man who's familiar with the building. So I think the proof is clear. I think that's what the board has depended upon previously, particularly the tax records. And I think it should be certified as a pre-existing non-conforming use with 20 units.
Okay. All right. The attorney, what really needs to be shown?
Huh?
Or if you guys are satisfied, we'll just make a ruling.
And we normally have a discussion, I mean, I missed something.
No. No, I don't think you missed anything.
So, I'm comfortable with the discussion. So,
You want to discuss?
yeah,
Okay.
I do. So,
Whatever you say.
it's what we normally do.
Yes, I agree.
So my thought process is, you have to separate, what you think should have been done versus what is actually done on this property and many cases like this that we heard before. And that's kind of where my conflict is. So I will tell you how I've always looked at these. I happen to agree that it is 1979, my opinion, not 77.
Hold up.
Well,
Yeah, well,
Thank you. I'm sorry. I said it was, in my opinion, 1979. It would have been great to have some contracts, for prior years. But just about every case that we've ruled on had pretty much similar evidence. Some had a little bit more, some had a little bit less. But in this case, this pretty much is the norm. We've always looked at, the date of prior to 79 as our rule of thumb. But for me, that's kind of really where I draw the line, is what was it being utilized. Now, I do realize I'm not naive to think that it couldn't have been switched illegally. I'm not a policing agency. I'm here to make an assessment of what could have been legally done at that present time. And this building could have been legally used as a 20 unit back there. And that's where I make my assessment. I'm not saying how they got there. I don't want to play policeman. Not my job. So I personally believe that it was pre-existing the ordinance, and it's legal for when it's being used. That's my personal opinion.
I agree. Tax records clearly show in 77 it became taxed as a 20 unit.
I don't even give that any thought, no disrespect to any tax people, if anybody's in here. I don't even give it any thought. I look at what the ordinance allowed and didn't allow. And it allowed this, even though it might have gotten there, nobody has any records to show me the way how it got there. But ordinance-wise, that's what I look at, because we're not involved in how it's taxed. Because tax does not determine legality. The ordinance do. And that's what I'm basing my decision.
Well, the one part of the testament, or the one part of Mr. Di Lorenzo's record is it was picked up as a 20 and 77.
Right.
So if it wasn't for the reevaluation, it may have not got picked up. It got picked up because of the reevaluation.
And a lot of them are that way.
Yes.
You know, but so, as a frame of reference, it's good, don't get me wrong. But how it got there, I'm not gonna attempt to make an assessment on how it got there, because that's not my job. Our job is to say, when it was picked up, was it allowed at that time? And the answer is yes, it was. So that's how I came to my judgment.
My feeling is, even if it's allowed, it still needs a permit.
I agree. And if we had a full-fledged documentation system, I'd be the first one to say, let me see the documentation. Unfortunately, we don't. And I will even admit, I'm sure there are people that are less genuine that use that, you know, as an advantage to themselves. And I can't, you know, that's their morality, not mine.
No, I understand. Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
All right. Anybody else wish to discuss? Do I have a motion and a second?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Smith to approve, seconded by Mr. Montalbano. Clerk, call the roll.
Caruso.
Yes.
Buchanan.
Yes.
Montalbano.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Sheldon.
Yes.
Milano.
Yes.
Delgertia.
Yes.
Thank you for your time and attention. By the way, Mr. Chairman, off the record, while deliberations were going on, I looked at my copy of the ordinance. It seems like there might be more pages. I don't have it.
More
Might be
pages.
more pages. Page 7, it is in an incomplete way.
The next case on the agenda is going to be the first case that was on the agenda that we held off because Mr. Ronald wasn't here. And that'll be 2014-08, 138, 146 Wright Avenue, Atlanta. We have an amended application. The applicant is proposing to renovate existing apartment complex and add 8 additional one-bedroom units to the existing 33 units. The additional 8 units will be located on the lower level.
Mr. Chairman, can I just have 1 minute to talk to my
Sure.
client?
Sure, I'll tell you what we'll do.
Real quick.
Yes, we'll have a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
We'll get together a quarter after 8, okay?
In the meantime, could you lower the AC a little or?
No.
No.
Because we have no control over it. That's the answer. I gave you a quick answer. I would love to lower it too, but I have no control over it. It's automatic someplace, I have no idea.
Nobody has any idea.
It's not blowing, it's blowing.
You're doing calamities, that's there.
Yeah, but
I want to do
you hear what I said?
Yes. No new testimony is required.
9:30. All right. 9:30. No. No, I'd rather.
I am going to visit you in Fairfield, too.
Will now come back to order. Mr. Gassion, you're up. ZB 2014-08, 138, 146 Brighton Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, obviously, council's name is Robert Gassion.
That's obvious, yeah.
This application has been pending for some period of time. The previous testimony was by Mr. Calandra and by the site engineer. We, subsequent to the last hearing, which is many months ago, have made some changes. My clients, the owner of 138 Brighton Ave, obviously were seeking an approval to increase the number of units. But previously, that approval being sought was for an additional 11 units that has now been reduced to an additional 8 units, all to be built within the existing structure. There are other changes that have been made, some of which were because of the canal, some of which were voluntary changes based on what was heard from statements from objectors, and therefore my client had his engineer and or architect make changes. So I'd like to recall Mr. Iannelli to the stand with regard to the discussion of those changes.
Well, the question before we start anything is, do we have to start from the beginning since the original application was in error because the Morris Canal property was included in everything?
I don't think that would be necessary.
I would ask the attorney.
But that's...
Well, I'm assuming what Mr. Iannelli is going to do is what he should do is briefly review his testimony from last time, obviously modifying the testimony where needed to reflect the issue with the canal, just so if someone's here for the first time, they can get a sense of what's happening, but for the spaces that are lost.
He'll review all the relevant testimony and go over the changes.
All right.
Mr. Iannelli, you recall that you've been sworn with regard to this case?
Point of order.
Well, let's get to it, because I want to get this case done. Yes, come on.
Okay, thank you.
Name and address, please.
Mary Higgins, 148 Brighton Avenue, Higgins. We're looking at the agenda. It says that it's continued, but next to it, it says new plans.
Yes.
So is this an amended application or a new one?
No, it's an amendment.
It's amended. Okay, therefore, if it's amended, didn't the public have a right to view a copy of the amended plans? Because I know of 2 people that went to the office yesterday and they said they were unavailable to the public. They were supposed to have been made available 10 days before this hearing.
10 days before, yes. We had the plans. The plans were sent to us and they went into the office on the 20th of March. They're actually stamped the 20th of March.
Well, I'm under oath that I went there yesterday and another person went there yesterday.
I also understand you went there a couple of weeks ago.
They were unavailable to the public. They were unavailable.
Mr. Where is it?
Right here, John.
What's the story on this, please?
Chair, I believe everything's in the file, I'm not sure, but I can check tomorrow.
I don't know why it wasn't available, man, because they've been there. And I understand you went a couple of weeks ago, you had a problem, I was told.
I didn't have the problem. The office had the problem in not making them available.
And how long ago was this?
That was 2 weeks ago, 10 days before. And if you recall from the first hearing of this, we had the problem back in October where they were not made available to
Well,
us.
I was told, and you tell me, maybe there was a misunderstanding. I was told that you were asking for a copy of the application. The application never changed. The plans changed.
So the plans are unavailable for public viewing, is that correct?
No, the plans are available.
Well, then why weren't they made available?
I have no idea. You would have to ask the construction code official. I can't answer that question. He says they're there.
So this proceeding is improper because the public did not have access to any visible copies of changes. And we were denied our rights. Does anybody else want to speak up on this?
Well, let the attorney talk first, then if anybody else.
The chairman will run the meeting. All I can tell you is that you had a right, anyone else had a right to see the plans. They were, from what I understand, they were here When you said they weren't available, I don't know whether you mean they wouldn't let you see them or they didn't have them. They're two different, what was your sense of that?
All right, they said they were not in the office. They didn't know where they were. They assumed that they had been all forwarded to the members of the board. They were no longer accessible to the public. They were physically not in the office yesterday.
What about 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, they were there. I was not allowed to have a copy of them. I had to stand there and write some notes down. I
So you
subsequently
reviewed them
filed
then?
an Oprah report for them, which has not been released to me. Conveniently, it's going to be released to me tomorrow. That's why I returned yesterday to even look at the reports to take more notes. And they said they didn't know where they were.
Well, let me ask you something. You said you reviewed them 2 weeks ago?
I looked at them.
You looked.
I was not allowed to have a copy.
The only updated reports are the ones that are in here dated March 30th.
It consisted of a letter from the town engineer addressed to the board and also from Mr. Gaccione.
Letter from National.
Yes, a letter from Mr. Gaccione addressed to the board, the zoning board.
Was that the one where he requested an adjournment?
That was a month ago.
No, it was dated in April.
Mr. Gassion, you sent us a letter that I don't know about?
I would think I submitted documentation to the construction official's office, but I'll take a look and see what my correspondence section reflects that you might be talking about.
Okay, the letter was dated March 30th, 2015, and the letter from the board engineer from the town was dated April 1st, 2015. That's all that I got because I had a copy in my hand. It was addressed to the zoning board.
The March 30th I have are both dated reports from the engineering department, okay? I believe, am I wrong?
I don't even have.
Actually,
I don't even have the reports.
You don't have the reports?
No. Not the March
Then
30th.
how can this continue if nobody has the reports and if the public didn't have access to it? We were denied access. How can this happen where
Wait a minute, hold on.
nobody knows where it is? Then we're on shifting sand here.
Well, one is supposed to be an engineering report, the other one is supposed to be revised planning report. But I have both the same. It doesn't say exactly what it is. So Mr. Hurwitz, can you please stand and be sworn in?
Tom, with regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth? State your name and just spell your last name for the record.
Yes.
You're the board planner and engineer?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Hurwitz, I have a very simple question. I may have gotten 2 copies of the same thing by error. Did you make a revised engineering report and a separate revised planning report with the new plan?
No, I just made a general review and stated March 30th, 2015.
Okay. All right, so you got it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have an extensive letter, March 20th, submitting documentation.
March